Hey everyone, John from Bike Fit Advisor. So I've been getting a lot of requests for some more mountain bike fitting content, so I thought we'd tackle a couple things today. Now we could talk about saddle height, that comes up a lot, but to me this is fundamentally just not as interesting, especially with the advent of dropper seat posts. But we can do that in another video. But what I want to talk about today is the cockpit distance, or some people call it the reach, although it's not entirely accurate, and I'll sometimes even misplace the name that way. Essentially the bar position, how far away from the saddle and how high it is. Now there's probably even more variety in mountain bike bar position and what's acceptable than there is even on the road bike. But just like the road bike, we have to determine our bar position based partially on our body. Of course, we have to put our bar in a position that is acceptable to the body so we can remain balanced and in a good position. But on the mountain bike, something else is also extremely important, and it has to do with the terrain. That's going to play a factor in where our bar ends up. Put simply, the less technical the terrain, the flatter, the easier, the less obstacles, fewer obstacles in the way, the longer the bar position can be, and also the lower the bar position can be. We can essentially be closer to our typical road position when it's in this very non-technical sort of type of riding. On the other end of the spectrum, very technical riding usually requires us to have a little shorter bar position and also a little higher bar position. Now, most of us are going to exist somewhere in the middle, but it kind of begs the question, where should we end up? And if we were to err on the side of maybe being, should we err on the side of being more aggressive, or should we err on the side of being less aggressive and more upright? And I contend that it's much safer to err slightly on the side of maybe being a little bit more upright. And here's why. So this spectrum produces kind of two extremes, of course, and there are different problems at each end of the extreme. So when we have a more aggressive position, a longer bar position, a lower handlebar position, this presents a possible problem when you encounter more technical terrain. It can make it, this aggressive position can make it more difficult for you to unweight the front wheel in order to manage this technical obstacle, whatever it is, whether it's going down something steep or trying to get your front wheel up a ledge or whatever the case is. On the other end of the spectrum, there are some out there that feel that if you are too upright, or if you change your position such that it can take too much weight off of the front wheel, causing it to be unstable, and especially in softer dirt or sand, might create a situation where you crash or wipe out. When we are in our riding position, our standard position, hands on the handlebars and our rear end on the seat, regardless of how long or how low our bars are, put that aside for now. But when we are in this position, we are naturally nearly as far back as we can go. What I mean by this is our center of gravity is about as posterior or as rearward or towards the back of the bike as it's going to be. Not entirely, but it's most of the way there. So we have less opportunity and we have less distance that we can go to take our center of gravity and move it even further back when we're starting from this standard riding position. There are many more ways and easier ways for us to get our weight forward. So take, for example, our arms when we're on the bike. Now, our arms are not completely straight, but they're nearly straight. And so we just have a little bit that we can straighten those arms and maybe, protract those shoulder blades and round our shoulders out in order to allow us to scoot our center of gravity further back on the bike when we encounter technical terrain. But when we need to add weight to the front wheel, say we're on a slight downhill and making a turn, especially in softer dirt or sand, we can actually bend our elbows a little bit, shift our center of gravity more to the center of the bike very easily, and we can do it quite a bit very quickly and weight that front wheel to maintain traction. And, I hear often, well, you can move your hips back. And yes, you can. You can move your hips back, but we can move the hips forward more, and we can also move them forward much easier by sliding forward on the saddle, or even getting off the seat and moving forward. It's easiest to see, I think, when you look at where our center of gravity is. So our center of gravity is just a point, and it exists somewhere kind of deep in our belly, just in front of the lumbar spine. And if you look at where the center of gravity is on a cyclist, it is behind both the feet and the hands. And so that center of gravity is already almost as far back as it can go. It can go forward quite a lot and very easily. Because it exists behind those two contact points already, it just makes moving the weight forward a little bit to weight the front wheel that much easier. So if your mountain bike setup does give you trouble because, let's say for instance, you have a difficulty getting up, getting your front wheel up onto ledges, or you feel really unstable going down steep things because it feels like your weight is already too far forward, you feel like you're going to go over the handlebars, or some variation on these two ideas. So this is why I think it's usually safer to err slightly on the side of being a little shorter and more upright on the bike. Now, not everybody needs a truck driver position of sitting perfectly upright. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that if you're kind of on the borderline whether you can tackle all the technical terrain in your area and the type of riding you do with your current position, and certain aspects of the terrain make you feel really unstable, then that might be a good situation to err a little bit further back. So 2 takeaways from today's video. First is that when we're setting the bar position on a mountain bike, the terrain has to have a say in all of it. And the second is of course we want to have the perfect setup. But if you're not sure, erring on the side of being a little shorter or a little higher, a little less aggressive, is usually going to be the safer choice. Because it's much easier to put a little bit of weight on the wheel than it is to take a little bit of weight off of the wheel. So let me know your thoughts. Thanks for hanging in there on this video, and I will see you on the next one.